I am Brandon Clark. This is my co-host Swall Hall, and today we're meeting on uncommon ground. So there's been quite the week, last 2 weeks. Obviously, the Trump and Elon feud has taken over a lot of that. So we're going to start there, discuss the different back and forths, how it started, everything about that, and unpack who's right, maybe who's wrong. Is anyone right in something like this? Who knows? Then we're going to get to the travel ban list. For those who don't know, Trump signed a proclamation, an executive order essentially banning travel from 12 states, 12 countries completely. And then I think there was five that are like partially, or might be a little more than five. I'm not sure the exact number there, kind of reflecting the travel ban he tried in his first administration. So we'll get into that. There's ICE raids in LA and San Diego, really just all across the country. But the big ones we'll focus on are like California specifically, the protests in LA that have been happening, and then Trump mobilizing the National Guard. So kind of just covering the entire story around the immigration makeup and how it's looking. And then we'll end with a debate on should America return to Christian values. It'll be kind of not like, should we be forced to, but would we be better off if we did? But we will start with Trump and Elon. Swa, as the resident conservative, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah,
Whose side are you
so
on?
I mean, we talked about the one big beautiful bill last week or last show. I don't remember if it was last week, but last show, and we both kind of agreed that there's some good in it, some bad in it. Neither of us are a fan of the debt going up, but obviously that's pretty much going to happen no matter what bill at this point gets passed. I do think that it's interesting that everybody is acting like when Elon tweeted that Trump was on the Epstein files, that's like some sort of like bomb drop. I'm like, didn't haven't we known this? Like, isn't this something that we've all been aware of?
Yeah.
I mean, there's photos of them together. There's photos of them together with young women. Like, none of this is new. Um, but it is interesting to see that it seems like Musk is actually somewhat serious about the fiscal spending, whereas Trump, it seems to be more talk, obviously, as is no surprise to anyone. So I guess if I had to pick a side, I'm on Elon's side just because I also want to be fiscally conservative. And I do think that Trump is probably on those files. But yeah, I think obviously going out and tweeting it and then him posting on Truth Social, it's like a bunch of children bickering kind of thing. So it's embarrassing for the country. But
I think it's kind of crazy to me, like the perspective, and I don't know if it's like rich people stuff or if it's conservative stuff or like what to call it, but the fact that and both of these guys think this is a slam dunk on the other person. But
right.
Elon came out and he said, "Yeah, I donated $250 million, campaigned with a pedophile, helped get this pedophile elected to office. He's on the Epstein list, but I did help him, and I've been in his inner circle these
Right.
last months." And then Trump, in response to that, was like, "Oh yeah, well I gave a drug addict a millions of Americans sensitive data. This whole time that I've been letting Elon see all your sensitive data, he's been a drug addict and he might be undocumented." And like both of them think they're owning the other person, but it's like a bigger self-report, I would think.
Right. It's like you're really just taking down the entire Republican coalition by roasting yourself, roasting the people you work with. You're just making yourself look like an idiot from
Yeah.
Trump's perspective. And then obviously with Elon, again, like you said, okay, dude. So if you knew he was in those files and you're just like cool with it,
Yeah.
like
Like you
what?
you donated $300 million to get this man in office. And you're
Right,
saying you
right.
knew he was on the Epstein files. Like, I think that's a bigger knock on you, my guy.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think that they're both just a bunch of babies, and what we really need is people who aren't children running our offices and running the government and working together and have principled partnerships and not ones where people just stab each other in the back over petty things. Like I heard this all sort of started because of the person that was nominated to take over NASA or something, that Elon really wanted them and Trump didn't because he like voted Democrat or something, which is a really stupid bar because Trump, my guy, you were a Democrat for your whole life. And you even said when you were a Democrat, if I run, I'm going to pretend to be a Republican. Like,
Yeah.
and then your own vice president was speaking out against you before you picked him in 2016, like not even that long ago, or 2018 maybe. I don't even remember. It was very recent that Vance was speaking out against you. So if that's the bar, then like you got to get rid of half your guys, 70% of your guys. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's petty, it's childish.
It was it was the fracture was between Scott Bessent and Elon Musk. And I don't No, I don't remember if it was NASA. It might have been, I thought it was like IRS, the commissioner for the IRS. It might have been NASA, but it
Okay.
was someone like that. I know the
Yeah.
fracture was between Scott Bessent and Elon. Scott Bessent wanted one guy, Elon wanted the other guy. Trump went with Bessent, which maybe one of the only like good things Trump has done. As much as like I disagree with Scott Bessent across the board, he's actually like a respectable person. You know what I mean? Unlike
Right.
Elon Musk, who is like a child. But what do you think of Republicans like Steve Bannon and others? It's not necessarily like elected Republicans, but like these figures who went from telling us that Elon was the cure to every problem in the government to now going as far as with Steve Bannon saying, well, he should be deported. He's an undocumented immigrant. And
Yeah, I
like,
saw that clip. That clip
yeah,
was absolutely wild. Um, yeah, I think that this just shows that none of these people are principled and they're willing to switch on a dime. I mean, it's irritating because they talk and they talk and they talk and they convince people who don't have critical thinking skills to support them and to vote for them. All the while, they have no plans to be principled and stick to what they're doing. They stick to what's popular. They stick to what's politically advantageous to them. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I've never took Steve Bannon seriously, but none of us should take any of these people at their word. Take every politician, anybody who's involved with politics, with not even a grain of salt, the whole salt shaker,
yeah.
because these guys are liars. They're professional liars, to
Mhm.
be honest. So, yeah, I mean, none of this is surprising. It's kind of funny to watch the meltdown. I saw jokes about Elon getting off the ketamine and coming down because he posted like he like deleted his tweet or something,
Yeah.
and it's just like, is
And
this really what our country's come to?
it really is. Yes. It's crazy to see unfold. And I hate to say I told you so, conservatives, but I told you so. The last part I wanted to touch on with this, unless you had more that you want to go in, was the real loser, I think, in this is Republicans in the middle. Those like
Right.
JD Vance comes to mind, who like one of his biggest donors is like Peter Thiel, who I
Hmm.
mean, Peter Thiel
Hmm.
and Elon Musk have big history. So like he's kind of the one, and there's others who have like been supporting Elon and like, kind of pushing into his inner circle. And then there's like the ones who are cozying up to Trump. And now you all have to pick sides. Like there's no more playing both. You have to pick sides. And you either have the president campaigning against you in a primary, or you have the richest man in the world giving millions of dollars to primary. So
Yeah,
there's like, it's like a
pick
lost
your
cause.
poison.
And I would say JD Vance is the biggest loser, except for the fact that there was no chance in hell he was ever going to get elected to anything. Like the chance he would ever become president, slim to none.
You don't think they're gonna run him, or do you
Oh,
think they will and he'll just lose?
I think they'll run him. I don't even know if he comes out of a primary. I don't even know if he would win the Republican primary, honestly. I think
Yeah, I
Marco
mean,
Rubio has a better chance than him, honestly.
like I don't know how the MAGAites are feeling because those aren't my people, but in my like conservative Catholic circles, we're kind of done with Vance because I'm sure you know that he is a Catholic, but
Mhm.
he's come out since meeting Pope Leo, and he didn't like. There's a bunch of stuff you're supposed to do ceremonially to the Pope. He didn't kiss his ring. He didn't do all this stuff because he said he was an American first, which in our belief system is a big no-no. You're a Christian first.
Mhm.
Whatever your nationality is comes second. Your allegiance is to God. So we're kind of done with him in the Catholic sphere. So I know he's lost a lot of the religious
Isn't it kind of weird?
traditionalists.
Isn't it kind of weird for him too? Because like the Pope has like made posts about Trump or something like that, or
Yeah, well, Leo hasn't, but Francis obviously spoke out against him, unless I missed a Leo tweet. But I know Francis was very vocal against Vance and Trump and their immigration stuff, which we'll talk about in the third topic.
yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, no, I don't like you would know way more than I would. I just remember something about a tweet coming up. It might have been Francis. It might have been someone else who was just getting consideration. And I just remember it was
right.
like an article and all the conservatives were like angry and they're saying like the it's woke and stuff. And so I just didn't know if JD Vance was like falling in that wing kind of among the Catholic type vote.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some who are, I would say, ideologically captured and are MAGAites. But
Mhm.
yeah, from what I see, people are pretty irritated with him.
Who do you know? You know are the Catholics discussing anyone this early? Is Mike Pence back on the forefront of Catholic discussion?
No, I haven't seen anything like that, but I'll keep an eye out for who we're supporting.
Yeah, right. We'll get into that in the 2026 episodes,
Right.
I'm sure. But yeah, no. So, did you have anything else you want to touch on?
Nah, let's move on to these bands.
Yeah, so we'll start, I guess, the rest of the episode till the debate will kind of be more immigration centered, starting with the travel ban list. Infamously, Trump came out in his first term with a Muslim travel ban. The first iteration of it was more specifically the Muslim ban, the one that was blocked. I don't remember the amount of countries, but it was specifically Muslim countries with the idea of lowering terrorism or something like that. That got blocked. He tried a second one. I think that got blocked. And then the third one, he ended up getting through. He added a couple other countries to it. There were some workarounds he had to do. He seemingly learned from that and took those changes he had to make and put it into this one where he's banning, like I said, I'm more concerned with the ones he's fully banning travel from, which is 12 countries. They are notably predominantly brown population countries. Not a single European country is on this list. Of the countries, you have two that are experiencing genocide, like a US recognized genocide in Sudan and the Congo. There's deep humanitarian crisis in Haiti, Yemen, Somalia, Chad, Afghanistan. I mean, in Yemen, a child dies every 10 minutes. So he's blocking even asylum from these places. What I saw, and that was different from the first travel ban and this one, is he's letting existing visas stay, existing green cards stay, where in the first one, he had revoked those, which was kind of a
Mhm.
big point of contention. So yeah, I'm with that laid out. What have you heard about it? What are your thoughts about it? And then we can kind of get into it.
Yeah, I think the ones that are partially restricted, I think there was seven of those. I think you
Seven.
said five. I think I read that there was seven.
Okay.
Now, obviously, the White House is citing national security on these things, and obviously that is a responsibility of the government, obviously, to protect our nation and to protect our citizens. And I think hopefully both sides can agree that there could potentially be times in which a ban would be necessary. I would just say that any bans would need to be just and transparent and proportional, and that even if his intention isn't to, ban just brown people, that, there's optics and people can kind of take it wrong. Um,
I don't know
so
how you take
yeah,
this right.
well, fair enough. But yeah, I just think that obviously it's the government's job to protect, and so I'm not against the bans, but I do see why optically people see it as like a race issue where we're banning the Congo and Haiti and a bunch of places with brown people. But the thing is with these countries is that a lot of these asylum seekers were coming into the country under the guise of asylum, but potentially not actually needing the asylum and causing problems here on our soil. And that's what Trump is trying to fight against. But me personally, um, I'd say obviously with human dignity, we still need to be open to allowing people from these war-torn areas. I think you said, was it Yemen? You said somebody a child dies every
Child dies
10
every
minutes.
10
That was in
minutes in
Yemen.
Yemen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like we need to do this on a case by case basis, in my opinion, and not just a blanket ban, because there are people in these countries who do need asylum and aren't coming here just to cause trouble. But I think we should be able to also admit that there are people who use this and abuse this just like with any other system. So,
What do you think specifically about the fact that he expedited the white South African refugees
oh, right. From last.
on the grounds of genocide that are completely unfounded, and he's now blocked two countries from having refugees that are experiencing a U.S. recognized genocide?
Right. And this is where I'm saying that these bans need to be just and proportional and balanced across the board. We can't choose and pick and just pick my people or, oh, the people who are giving me money or telling me to, to do it for these people. Um, but again, there is some truth to needing to limit some of this stuff. I just don't think that this is the approach to take personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think one, it doesn't really address any of the problems, right? Like
Right.
you're not like fixing the asylum system, you're not fixing the visa system. If anything, you're just
Right.
like kicking the can down the road and
Exactly.
keeping your numbers low. So like, oh, it looks good for me. Also, asylum is protected in domestic and international law. So like for me, where it starts getting sketchy is when you include asylum bans in your travel bans. I think that if you're gonna ban travel, if you're gonna ban like visas or these kinds of things for an extended period of time with a very justified, provable reason, yeah, like I'm sure there are times of national security where maybe this group of people or this group of people shouldn't come in. But when you're like also extending that to asylum claims to where like, okay, maybe like let's say it's a country where there's a terrorist group and you don't want that terrorist group coming into America. Well,
Right.
okay, why are you then also restricting the children in that country who could be like
Right.
fleeing that same terrorist group to America?
Right. And, you know, depending on the age of the children, let's not be naive to think that there can't be like 14, 15-year-old terrorists. I mean, there can be as well. And so I understand the idea of, well, they might just be coming under the guise, but my heart is always towards people. And so I'm always going to lean towards like optimism, I guess, in that area and assuming that these people actually need help. But again, you know, I understand people have lost family members and stuff to gang violence or criminal violence for people coming who came on asylum. So I really do see both sides, but like you, I think we both agree that a blanket ban, that ain't it, Chief.
Yeah, and it's
Having
also
some restrictions, maybe, but a blanket ban, I don't know.
Yeah, it's also important to note that when he finally did get the iteration passed in his first term, it didn't really do much. Like Trump in his first term didn't really reduce illegal immigration by a lot. He lowered legal immigration by a lot, by 11.6 million, actually, is how much he lowered legal immigration. So, like, if we're talking about effectiveness of these kind of blanket bans, it seemingly just works to lower legal immigration, which there's typically a line that can be drawn from where, and there's also just like the logical conclusion of if you're lowering legal immigration, you're going to get more illegal immigration. And I mean, it can also, you can show it where Trump lowered legal immigration by 11.6 million, Biden let in around 11.2 to 12 million undocumented immigrants. So the line is pretty much 1-to-1 there. I also think that, and this might just be, the dumb lefty in me, but I think that removing sanctions in a lot of these countries that cause the environments that foster migration from them would go a lot further than just banning them from leaving or something.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you on that with the sanctions and stuff. And like I said, I think that there's way better ways to get to what he claims he's trying to achieve with these things. Um, but as has been par with the course for this administration, unfortunately. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add on that other than that I hope that we get some positive effects by that, but all I can do is hope. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, so I guess we'll hop over to the ice raids.
Before we move on,
Yeah.
I'm at 10%. I'm gonna go grab my charger and we can
Yeah.
cut it and edit
You're
it.
good. Yeah,
My
go
bad.
ahead and we'll hop back in.
All right, my background's about to change because the plugin's on the other side of the porch. So give me 1 second. I'm just gonna pick up my computer.
Okay, you're good. You teleported mid-episode.
I know.
That's the story we'll go with.
Just grabbing my cup.
Yep, no, you're good.
All right.
All right. I also did want to ask, I mean, I wasn't going to ask in the moment, but I was thinking, did you want to head up this one by chance or no?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, cool. You're froze though right now, so let's wait for you to unfreeze.
Is it me?
Now you're
Hello,
unfrozen.
you're back. Oh,
Yes.
you were frozen.
Oh, you were frozen for me, so we were both
Oh,
we were both
okay.
frozen.
Yeah, I could do the ice raids and protest stuff.
Cool. Awesome. If you wanna, whenever you're ready.
All right, so jumping into segment three here, the ICE raids and the LA protests. So this past week, from the 6th through the 8th, ICE decided to raid the LA area. And I think they hit a bunch of different day labor sites like some Home Depots and stuff and arrested 118 undocumented immigrants. And after that, protests erupted in Compton. I think it was downtown LA and one other area, I think.
San
Excuse me.
Diego.
Yeah. And I'm not sure. I didn't get to read if they. I assume, like all other protests, that they completely started peacefully, and then once the police show up, that always seems to be when things start to go down. I went to a few protests during the BLM summer myself, and so I've experienced it firsthand, where the um, the tone can change when the cops start getting involved. And so, yeah, unfortunately, it erupted into more of a fight between the police. They started using tear gas. And then Trump deployed the National Guard. And I believe this is the first time in 60 years that the president has deployed the National Guard without the governor of the
Yep.
city asking him to. And so, from my perspective, obviously, I believe as a Catholic in law and order and all of that, I believe and compassion. And obviously, undocumented immigrants are breaking the laws, but they're human beings. They deserve dignity. They deserve our love. They deserve our compassion. And so, if the federal government is going to respond to this sort of law breaking, it needs to be, with mercy. It needs to be just. It can't be, yanking children out of classrooms or spraying protesters with tear gas.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then him deciding to do the National Guard is a bit scary, to say the least. But yeah, I would say, just before we get into it, everybody, thoughts and prayers for anybody who got injured or is out there in LA. And yeah, so what do you think about all of this,
Yeah,
Brandon?
I agree with you. First off, on thoughts and prayers for anyone involved that's been harmed, either, officers or protesters,
Right.
migrant, American, doesn't matter. I have a huge problem with ICE as a, again, dumb lefty. I don't think ICE should exist, right? For those who don't know the context of ICE, ICE is a conservative fever dream that was created in 2003, I believe, and Homeland Security was 2002, and then ICE was 2003 in response largely to 9/11.
Mhm.
And it was, I think, an overreaction. Personally, I think we did a lot of things in response to 9/11 that was a bit of an overreaction. And
Absolutely.
this is one of them. And to have ICE, like, because you have to keep in mind that they're like the Gestapo. They're a federal agency. They don't have the same kind of like regulations that police have. They don't have the same standard of ethics, code of ethics they have to uphold now under Trump, because they're a political police force, right? So like largely they're determined by who the Trump or who the president appoints to head them. And now what we see is they're going as far to talking about ICE doesn't need warrants to enter homes, that they can be fully masked up when they do these raids. So I think people are like rightfully worried, especially when you see things like Mahmoud Khalil being detained and deported for protesting. You see Abrego Garcia getting deported without due process. You see all these different people getting picked up, disappeared, detained for weeks, and in some cases deported. I covered on my channel, I can't remember her name, but a lady who was wrongfully stopped for a traffic violation. They found
Yep.
out she was undocumented, and then they deported her. And it comes to find out that they had stopped the wrong car and the whole thing, and she never did anything wrong. So when we're talking about ICE, I think it's important to understand that context. And then when they're using this power to walk through civilian neighborhoods in riot gear with flashbangs and tear gas, heavily armed, it's obviously going to escalate any situation. Like there's a part of like understanding the moment that you're in that Trump, I think, purposefully doesn't, because you have to understand when it's appropriate to send ICE through the streets or when it's going to escalate to things just like this. And I think Trump, one, probably either didn't care or two, did it purposefully to lead to these riots so he could then do something like weaponizing the National Guard against California's ass, by the way, which, as you said, unprecedented. And I mean, for the last 5, 6 decades. And funny enough, when there were just whispers, Biden never even said anything about it. When there were whispers of Biden sending the National Guard to Texas over the border standoff, Republicans had a field day. Like I put on my YouTube a screenshot of Kristi Noem posting on Twitter saying it's a direct attack on states' rights and unconstitutional, but now it's a glorious thing.
Yeah, and briefly touching on that Texas thing, I remember being against my conservative peers there and thinking, this is just straight up, insubordination. Like
Yeah.
this is almost Civil War level of just not listening to the federal government about immigration laws. Like that is their jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, talking about California, I know they have a bunch of sanctuary laws too. So there's even some questions on where's the line with federal enforcement on these undocumented immigrants with a state that has sanctuary laws anyways. And then you already touched on it, but deploying the troops against civilians is always risky and always causes escalation. As I mentioned earlier with me at the protests, it's like it just makes the whole vibe uneasy, and it's like who's going to move first, who's going to move first, sort of thing, and it just ruins any chance of everything going smoothly. Um,
And
and
what I'll say to his
yeah,
defense is I think it's a really hard thing to do correctly. Like when
right,
things are escalating,
right,
protests and riots are happening, it's a really hard thing to do correctly to de-escalate them. But when you're just brazenly like send in ICE and send in the night, like that's
right,
obviously not the right thing. But you can go on.
right. And I saw somebody. Now I would say please don't bring your babies to protests,
Yeah.
but I did see a young toddler who unfortunately got tear gassed and is now I don't know if they're in the hospital or what they're doing. Obviously they're getting some sort of medical attention, but and I mean, that's just heartbreaking to see. But of course, like I said, please don't bring your
Yeah.
children to protests.
You
It's
should
not a place for
absolutely
them.
know better. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's just awful to see this stuff, especially when we should be, moving towards humane legal pathways for citizenship instead of just sweeping raids that terrorize the local community. Like, they went to the Home Depot. These people are out here doing lawn
Yep.
work and building homes and like just minding their business, dude, and shooting the shit in the car and just having a. If you've ever met these guys, I've met some of these guys. Like these are cool. A lot of
Literally.
these guys are just cool guys, and
Remember when it
I
was about violent criminals? Like,
right, and it's like I had some neighbors who tried to become citizens, and I think it took them a decade. A
mhm,
decade.
yeah,
Why? It makes no sense, and that it leads to stuff like this
exactly.
because these people desperately want to come to. It's like we say that this is the greatest country in the world, and then we're surprised that people want to come here.
Mhm.
It's just a weird position for the right to take, in my opinion. But I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on how to deal with the illegal immigrant crisis, if you even think it's a crisis, or just should anything be done? Should we shut down ICE, turn a blind eye, and just let anybody like what would you do if you were in charge?
Yeah, well, It's a bit separate from the topic, but I would shut down ICE. I think it's a bit unnecessary to have both Homeland Security and ICE, and I think
Sure.
Homeland Security is the one that makes more sense of the two. I don't really like a political police force. Like just the idea of that, of like they can do all the things that police do, but they have less standards of ethics and they're completely partisan. I don't like that. What I would do about the migrant crisis, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, the large influx of undocumented migrants is I would do personally mass amnesty for any undocumented migrant that has not committed a violent action. I just think that that's the simple answer. I think it's it's going to be the biggest incentive for these migrants to come forward. If we're talking about the issues are we don't know who they are,
Right.
they're
They're
getting
not paying taxes. They're not
table,
on,
yeah, they're
even though
not
they
paying
are.
taxes. All of this mass amnesty solves all of that with a larger incentive than mass deportation. Because obviously, if you tell them we're going to deport you, nobody's going to come forward for that. But if you tell them we'll give you a pathway to citizenship, more people are going to come forward. It's also it's more cost effective, less costly than mass deportation. The average deportation flight is like 14 to 17,000 a seat for per person you're deporting. That equates for every migrant. I did the math on my channel. It's like 200 something billion dollars to get every migrant out versus mass amnesty. Not only does it cost nothing, you're adding to our tax base, creating more revenue through doing that. And the deportations not only cost money, but then they erase from the tax base because, contrary to popular belief, undocumented immigrants pay around 100 billion in taxes each and every year.
Right.
I am curious what you think of that because I know we've talked about it briefly. But what would your steps be if you, President Swall?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, hot take for the conservative side. I'm not totally against what you just proposed with the amnesty. My only concern would be I don't that deals with the ones who are here.
Mm-hmm.
What about it just continuing to happen for, the
Yeah,
rest
yeah,
of
and that's a good point.
American history? And
I
that's
think
where
we
I would want like, the wall. I never really thought sure, I'm sure it does something, from like just anybody crossing over, but obviously people still are making
yeah,
it here, so it's not doing all that much. So I would just really focus on the immigration process and
yeah,
making it simpler because a lot of this stuff is just so stupid because they have these tests and these quizzes and all you got to go through the schooling and all this stuff for stuff that natural born American citizens don't know jack about.
yeah.
We don't
And
even know, we can't even do these things.
And this is what I would say is like, even if the Harper's like, oh, well, we don't want to reward people who came here undocumented. If you want to just make them like permanent residents, maybe they can never become citizens, right? Like
Right.
something like that. Make permanent residents pay a higher tax rate, even or something. I'm fine with whatever the little details, bits and pieces to get it done.
Right. The
I
I
just think
moved
it's
here illegally tax.
yeah, exactly. I just think it's like really dumb to be like, we're just going to keep these people undocumented and we're going to spend billions of dollars to deport them and we'll never
Year
get them
after
all
year
out.
after year after year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, there's no end to that.
Yeah. And then, and
That's
like you
just
said, it's also never addressing the actual problems, which is what needs to happen, which is more judges for asylum claims or total
absolutely
revamping of the visa process. Like, if you're working age, like you have skills that can help America, it should be nearly seamless for you to come into the country. Like, there should just be like
exactly.
okay, like here's your ID, like let's run this background check, you're good, right? Like, you can
Yep.
come in,
Yep.
line up a job for you. Like, it should be literally that easy. And I don't get why America doesn't like link up with the countries, like UN countries, ones we have allied, like that we're allied with, to make
Right.
some sort of
Some sort of
like
immigration
seamless,
program.
yeah, like a background check to where like you could even before you come to the country, you just like get on this website, fill out your data. We check with your country, it checks with
Yep.
ours, and then something like that.
And it's like you say that and it sounds so simple.
Yes.
Like it is with most of these political issues where you're like, really the whole system needs to be kind of retooled, but
Hmm.
nobody wants to do that. Instead,
It's a wedge
they want to
issue.
kick the can down the road and just do things that make their administration look good and then pass the problem on to the next president and the next president and the next generation. And it
Hmm.
just continues. But
And
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, and what I'll give your side is I do think that it's both Democrats and Republicans that are bad on this issue. I do think Republicans are a lot worse. Now, I do only
So
think
do
they're
I
worse.
actually.
What?
I said I agree. I
Yeah,
actually do too.
I think it's a better political issue for
They've
them,
turned
and
a
that's why I think they're
boogeyman
worse.
out of it. I think it's
Yeah.
insane. It's sort
Mhm.
of like the LGBT stuff where it's like, is this really our thing, guys? Is
Yeah.
this the hill we're gonna die on?
Exactly.
Especially because we're not doing anything about it besides just deport more of them.
That's what I'm saying. Like the
Okay.
last major immigration legislation was it I don't even know if the Gang of Eight even did any legislation. It's been like decades,
Yeah,
probably 2 decades
exactly.
or so. And it's just I don't know. Every time something comes to be, it dies and it never gets passed. And it's almost a hopeless issue, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, do you have anything else to add on the LA protests? I
No,
mean,
that
like
was
we
all.
both said, thoughts and prayers.
Yep.
Hopefully, I actually don't know if anything's still going on protest wise or if it's kind of settled down,
I think
but
it's like the
a lot,
dying embers.
yeah, with a lot of these things, if something goes wrong as it's kind of dialing down, things could go back up. So just hope that everything just kind of calms down a bit. But I mean, they could go in and do another giant raid next week, and we'll be
Yeah.
right here again talking about it.
Yep.
So
And it probably will happen. But yeah, no, since we're wrapped up there, we'll get to the actual debate. Should America return to Christian values? Again, it's more so, and I don't know if maybe Swall has better written the prompt written better, but we're more so just debating whether America would be better if the majority returned to Christian values. Just do you think
yeah,
that's
that's how I would phrase it. Is basically if a bunch of Americans or the majority of Americans decided to, even if they didn't convert, even if they
yep.
just were like, you know what, I'm going to be a cultural Christian. I like the value system. Would that be better or not for the country and for American society? I'd say
Yeah,
that's
and I think that's important to stress because like I'm not against people reaching that conclusion on their own. I'm definitely
right.
against like government enforcing that. Honestly, I feel like Swab probably would be against like
Yeah.
government enforcement of it
Yep.
too. So like we're just discussing more so would we
The
be better?
benefits or not. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that largely it would probably lead to increased maternal mortality for sure because like abortion would be out the window. We know when abortion is illegal, maternal mortality is higher. Largely the religious vote in all the last three elections overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump, so I think we would get bigoted, immoral leaders like Donald Trump. That is a logical conclusion it could lead to. And then social oppression of women, I think, would be a big thing. If you look in churches, which are like the only institution that like Christians have like complete control over, women like can't be the Pope, right? So I would think like a logical conclusion would be if Christians controlled society or if like Christian values controlled society, women couldn't head society. Also, there's lots of data throughout the years that showed that like Christians are like the highest perpetrators of hate crimes against Islam, like Islamophobia, one of the highest perpetrators of Islamophobia, hate crimes against Muslims. So I think that like it could create a harmful environment for religious minorities. Those would be the reasons I think we're better staying secular than leaning towards Christian values.
Yeah, I would say I think that America owes a lot of its good qualities to the Christians who founded the country. I think the moral importance of families. We built a lot of I know you mentioned that churches are the only institutions we control, but they're not the only institutions we created. If you've been to the hospital, I'm sure it was St. Vincent, St. Francis, St. Ascension. It was Hope Mercy Road Hospital. Most of the hospitals were built by the Christians, and this idea of taking care of our neighbor. Um, most of our best universities, Harvard, Yale, uh, Brown, a lot of these schools were all founded by as Protestant, even though I'm a Catholic. Protestant institutions because of the importance of investigating the natural world that God created, and so that's where a lot of that stuff comes from. But on stats wise, um, we see that Christians tend to have better health, or people who participate in the Christian ethos, I should say. They have about 25 to 35% reduction in mortality overall. They're 33% less likely to die over 16 years old. Another study found that 55% lower mortality rate over 18 years old. 75% of studies show higher religiosity correlates with reduced juvenile delinquency, stronger marriages, less divorces. And then, of course, as a Catholic, we believe in the cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance. Obviously, justice, our justice system, and the dignity of the person there. With temperance, not overindulging, not being alcoholics, not being drug addicts, not being overspending, or being like you would like unfettered capitalist, and it would be more morally centered. Prudence would be helping society make wiser long-term decisions and not thinking about the now so much and thinking about, hey, what about the people in the future? Climate change, stuff like that. Um, and then fortitude would just be, sort of perseverance through hard times and stuff. And I think that a lot of these things are good to base society off of. And of course, there's Christians volunteer more, they donate more, they participate in community more. Um, all sorts of points I could continue on, but that's sort of my argument. Is just that I think even if we're not, hi buddy, even sorry, my son's there. Even if they're not God believers, just to take up this ethos of, carry your cross, sacrifice for your loved ones, your neighbors, would be an overall benefit to society.
Do you think morality evolves over time?
I do not.
You don't. You think
Although
that,
I do think our understanding of it deepens over time.
so you think like in a moral foundation or like a moral, because like maybe you're misunderstanding. Specifically, what I mean is like in a moral foundation or within like a moral belief system, do you think the morality of things or what is viewed as moral or immoral can change over time? Do you think that evolves?
Yeah, I think what's viewed as it is does, but what's truly moral or immoral does not change. We just get better information and figure it out
Well,
better.
yeah, sure, but that isn't that would be a claim of like from your moral belief system because you would be presupposing it as the right one. But
Objective.
yeah, but I'm just saying in the fact in a moral belief system, the morals of it can evolve. Like I mean, I think the easy point would be Christianity and slavery. At one time, it was pretty morally justified, and then Christians also became like the biggest pusher to end slavery. So like that obviously evolved for them over time. And I think that a lot of what you said with like creations that come from Christians, I think you kind of have to also point to the context of morality evolving with like love thy neighbor and hospitals, right? Like, sure, like I mean, which I don't know how true that is. I would believe you if you deposited that like hospitals came from Christians. Um, Christians today, however, would happily deny a trans person gender affirming care.
Sure, on the gender affirming care, absolutely. But I mean, that would be a disagreement on what kind of care that person needs to receive.
Right,
As
but
far as
that would be against all medical that would be against all what like medical professionals point towards, what data shows the medical
well, not
treatments
all,
lead to.
obviously, I'm going to have a laundry list of people who take my side, and you're going to have a laundry list of people who take your
Well, no,
side.
like if you look at like the APA, like the people who write the DSM, which is how you diagnose mental disabilities and things, they literally also say that gender affirming care
Oh, I
is,
agree with you. I agree with you that they say this. I just don't agree with you
yeah.
that they're the only to pretend like it's just like the whole all doctors say abortions are not medically necessary. Well, I can find literally 1,000. I can pull up 1,000 doctors right now who would say you never need to get an abortion ever in human history. So there's always going to be
Right,
people
but
on
there's
both
a difference
sides.
between like appealing to a professional and appealing to the consensus among a medical profession, right?
Right, and appeal to consensus would be fallacious just because a
I don't
bunch of
think
people
so.
believe
No,
something.
no, no,
Well,
no, no.
everybody thought that you and I were 3/5 of a person. Does that mean they were right?
No, like if you're talking like societal consensus, but if we're talking about like consensus of
Consensus in
fact,
general,
like scientific consensus, I think that's a pretty
but
good
it's
thing
not a
to lean on,
scientific fact because we're dealing in the realm of psychology and
which is a science,
subjectivism.
which is a
So
science. Psychology is a science, to be
we're
fair.
dealing with
But
subjects, so it's inherently subjective and inherently impossible to be objective when we're
that's
dealing with
not
these
true.
types of.
Psychology
It
isn't
is.
subjective.
It is because
Psychology is science, sir.
so
And it's
subjective would be anything based on a subject, and you're a human, so it's subjective, just definitionally. Objective would have
no.
to be non-subject, something um, that is true, independent of any subject, and so anything dealing with the human always be subjective because something might make you depressed and make me happy, or vice versa, and it's always going to depend on the
No, no,
individual.
what might cause that could be subjective, but the like depression isn't subjective. Depression is objective. So it's like
What
anxiety.
do you mean by that? I mean, it objectively exists, but it
Yes.
takes on
It
a
is
subjective form because
objectively
it's different for everybody.
it is objectively a psychological well like disability or whatever you would call it
Yeah,
condition.
we would agree there are objectively people who think that they were born the wrong gender.
Yes.
That would be
And
objective. What would
yes.
be subjective would be if all of those people need the same treatment, if cutting off their body parts
No, it
helps
would
them.
be
All of those
objective.
would be
There would be
depending on the
objective that a
individual.
treatment is typically beneficial.
Yes,
Just like you would
typically
say,
because it's subjective because it depends on the person.
no, no, it
I
doesn't.
mean,
What?
then what do you mean typically? It would be always.
No, well, because complications can just happen, like side effects from any procedure can happen. But in terms of like the outcome, the object or like the outcome that you're aiming for with a procedure is objectively beneficial. Now, whether that procedure will be successful in terms of will there be a complication, will like will the doctor do the
Well,
procedure right? Like there's a lot
that's
of
not what
other
I mean. What I mean
complications that can
is
come in.
there are people who get gender affirming care and
Mhm.
then it doesn't solve the issue. That's just a fact. And then they
Typically,
detransition or they kill themselves. That's just a
people will
fact.
get it's a
So it's
solution for
subjective.
gender dysphoria. People will get gender affirming care that aren't gender dysphoric, but I mean, and that's like an argument in of itself. Um, but yeah, and also hold on because we're
Yeah,
kind
we're
of
off base.
yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
say
I was just about to
I just
say,
realized
let's
we're like turning this
recenter
into a gender affirming care
trans
debate.
thing. Yeah, let's just recenter.
um,
Going back to the slavery thing. Yeah, I would say that's a deepening of understanding because what I'm arguing for is not that we follow the what's popular at the time or considered to be. There are objective Christian teachings or Christian beliefs, and such as love thy neighbor. The book says that. There's no way to say that it doesn't say that. It just says that. So I believe if we all decided to love our neighbor,
Well, I don't
that would
know.
be a good thing.
There's I don't. I wouldn't say that's an objective fact because you can also point to scripture where God said you can enslave your neighbors, right? And I would say that plenty of people would say that if you love someone, you want to enslave them. And this is one of the problems with the Bible, and I think in presupposing that it's objective is that it relies on interpretation, which interpretation is inherently
Well,
subjective.
that's why I'm saying I'm not saying that we should go with. Excuse me.
Mm.
What that we should go with things that you can derive from the Bible that aren't Christian teaching. I'm saying love thy neighbor is a Christian teaching. It says those
It is
words.
an interpretation of a Christian. It's an interpretation,
Well, an
right?
interpretation would be like that means I
It is
should do
how you guys
X.
interpreted that part of the Bible. Where again, there's other
But
parts
it's
of the
no, I mean,
Bible.
if
There's other parts of the
verbatim,
Bible that says you can enslave your neighbors. That Israelites could enslave others, but not
right? But
people
that's
from
not
Israel.
Christian teaching.
I
That's
mean,
the
it
problem.
was. I mean, yeah. Now, because of the interpretation of the writings, is to not go with that. It's again
No, I mean
subjective.
it was never Christian teaching. You said it yourself in the Hebrew. That was first off in the Jewish uh, Old Testament and the Torah and whatnot. And while those
Which the Old
are
Testament was Christian teachings before the resurrection of Christ.
well, there was no Christians before the resurrection of Christ. There was just Jews or Israelites or Hebrews, whatever you want to call them. So Christian teaching would say that slavery is wrong and that you should love thy neighbor, and that would be Christian
That
teaching.
would be
But
your interpretation of Christian teaching. It's like the fact that there's so many denominations of Christianity in and of itself. You can't say there's an objective Christian teaching because you have denominations that disagree under the Christian foundation. So like that just couldn't possibly be objective. That's subjective. The fact
sure, and to
that there's a
clarify,
thousand, how many denominations of Christianity are there? Like 1,000? Like that
yeah,
alone.
for Protestantism, the numbers are anywhere from 1,000 to 40,000.
Yeah. So, and that's what I'm saying.
Obviously,
So it's not objective. It's this, you're talking about your subjective interpretation.
well, I'm talking about obviously as a Catholic, I'm talking about Catholic social
Your
teaching.
denomination's subjective interpretation.
Well, Catholic isn't a denomination per se, but yeah, I
I
mean
mean,
we've
whatever
discussed it, and
semantic word you want to use. Yeah,
people
whatever
can refer
semantic you
to
want to
our
use.
debate that we did similar to this topic about morality. But in Catholicism, we have a way that the buck stops here. This is the interpretation, and so I know that
Yeah,
for all
and
of time,
where does the buck stop? With the church?
with the infallible teachings, and so
Right.
once it's said,
Which it's
there's no
presupposed
reneging it.
as
There's
infallible.
no
But if it
reneging
stops
it.
at the church, then it's up to the church's subjective interpretation. Like wherever you want to go, draw the line back. At some point, it's up to subjective interpretation. It's just that you presuppose it as infallible and objective.
Sure,
Yeah.
I'll admit that, but that's what I'm defending. So
Yeah.
using, oh, these Christians taught that, these Christians taught that. Well, yeah, I mean,
So then in a
I can
world
say I can say
where
this
everyone
group
thought
believes.
in a
Go ahead.
world where everyone thought that the church was infallible and objective, and then the church decided, let's do slavery. I think that's a huge flaw, right? I think that that's also
Well,
like just a
sure, but you're
scary
just
thing.
inventing a world that we don't live in. I mean, yeah, if
Are you
that was
saying
the
like the
case, that
church has
would
never justified objectively immoral things?
correct.
Okay. What's like this?
Um,
What was the Spanish Inquisition?
well, the Spanish Inquisition wouldn't be a teaching; that would be disciplinary
Did the church
governance.
justify the Spanish Inquisition at any point in history?
Well, what do you mean
Yes.
by
The answer there
justify?
is yes. They allowed it to happen. They were fine with it. They
Yeah,
were
well, the
behind it.
Inquisition.
They called for it. I don't know what
Well,
you're talking
yes,
about.
yeah,
If the church
yes.
has been corrupted, if something has been corrupted, then it can be corrupted. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, but I wouldn't argue that the
Okay, so
Spanish
then the church can be
Inquisition was
corrupted.
a bad thing necessarily. I would argue that the Spanish Inquisition,
Whoa!
yeah, I would
That's
defend,
insane,
yeah, I would
brother.
defend the Crusades. I would defend the Inquisition.
Okay,
Um,
we got to
how,
debate those then. Yeah, no, hold on. No, no.
however,
Now we got a whole other debate we got to do. Not right now, but we'll have
yeah,
to do
yeah,
like a
we'll
whole
add that
episode.
too, but that's got to be like a full episode
Yeah,
because
yeah,
we
full
can't
episode
just
debate.
spend 15 minutes on
No,
the
no, no, no.
Crusades.
No, that is an
But,
insane statement.
but
I guess here we went around the horn. We
yeah,
are getting to an
let me
hour.
wrap up
If
what
you
I was
want,
saying
I was
about
gonna
the
say if you want to
Inquisition
sum up, and then
before
I'll sum
I
up, and
leave it
then
off, making it sound like I support the basis of the Inquisition, the individual actions that people took throughout it. Same thing with the Crusades is a completely different story. Like just briefly, like the Crusades, the Christian holy lands were being attacked first, and we called, hey, people go enlist Christians around the world and let's fight back to protect ourselves. And that is just like any other war. That was fine. Now, within that, people, obviously did horrible things against the wishes of the church, like sacking Constantinople, attacking Eastern Christians, the Western Christians attacking Eastern Christians, doing things that weren't in line with what they were actually told to go and do. And so I won't defend the individual actions, but the actual basis of the Inquisition and the como se dice,
Crusades.
Crusades,
Yeah,
I would defend. But anyways,
yeah.
going back to the topic so we can wrap it up. Basically, what I'm advocating for is a society that values prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, volunteering, family, community, hospitals, taking care of people, um, loving your neighbor as yourself, all these types of things, sacrificing for others. Those are the things. So saying something like slavery has absolutely nothing to do with my position because I'm not defending slavery. And so that's how I would end that. And I think the stats are clear that people who believe in these religious things or at least adhere to them have significantly better lives and significantly better effects on society.
Yeah. How I would end mine, my TLDR is I think Christian values lead to a lot. They lead to some good things. They have good outcomes. They lead to, and I think a lot of the good outcomes, some of them can be better attributed to socioeconomic status. I think there's something to be said that rich people typically are more faithful Christians and religious people, but Christian values would undoubtedly lead to increased maternal mortality. Things like abortion would be shunned upon. We know when abortion is illegal, maternal mortality goes up by virtue of. You can go ahead. Yeah. What?
Oh, just on the abortion thing, you forget that this is in a world where most of us have the Christian values, so nobody would want to get the abortions.
I guess.
So it wouldn't be an issue
I don't
because
agree
we
with
wouldn't
that.
be trying to get it.
Do you think I mean, yeah, we don't have to spin the debate again, but every
Yeah.
Christian isn't pro-life. There's Christians who are fine with abortion existing. There's religious organizations that support abortion. So the idea that no one would be for it, not true. But yeah, it would lead to increased maternal mortality through virtue of people getting the abortions, right? Like illegally, which are going to be more dangerous, and through just dying through pregnancy complications. It will lead to leaders like Donald Trump, the religious vote, specifically the Christian vote, the evangelical vote, overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump 3 times. Donald Trump is someone who me and Swall both agree is on the Epstein list, was closely affiliated with Epstein. I think he's pretty openly racist. He's clearly a bigot. He has 23 sexual assault allegations against him. He raped E. Jean Carroll, then defamed her. All these things, right? Fraud, business fraud. And this is what Christian values voted for. So if that's the conclusion of people who hold Christian values, vote for people like Donald Trump, because they overwhelmingly did 3 times, I think that's also like a bad thing to follow. I think social oppression for women would be a huge problem. They're not allowed to be pope. They're seen as like, houses are supposed to be led by the patriarch. The man's supposed to be doing all this. And I think that if those values controlled society, society would then begin to be structured like that. Women might even be pushed out of the workplace. Who knows how far that would go? They definitely would be pushed out of positions of leadership. And then statistically, Christians are the highest religious group to commit hate crimes or bigotry against other religious minorities, specifically Islamophobia. A 2015 Public Religion Institute found 3 in every 4 Christians don't even think Islam should be in America. That is completely at odds. Christian exhibits or Oxford Academic found that Christians account for 62% of the hate crimes against Islamophobe or Muslims. The second biggest group is only like 5 or 6%, and it's Jewish people, which is also pretty closely intertwined there. So yeah, I just think regardless of like little statistical benefits, the moral implications of it would far outweigh that. So that would be how I summed it up. But also, it leads you to justifying things like the Spanish Inquisition when you hold Christian values, which we will have to debate because that is maybe one of the wildest things anyone's ever said to me.
I just want to add one thing. I don't want to continue the debate. Obviously, we got to wrap it up. But I should have specified at the beginning that the majority of Christians today don't hold Christian values either. So committing a hate crime, voting for Trump, most of these things
Yeah, that's just the
also don't
libertarian
align with
argument where
Christian
I'm the only
values.
real Christian and no other,
Well,
all
I'm
these
not.
Christians who do
I
bad
also
things.
don't fully hold them.
Yeah,
I'm just saying
yeah.
if we all did, because there is no Jew, no Gentile, no whatever. We're all in one in Christ. Racism's against it. So a lot of these things are in conflict with Christian values too. Christians just are human like anybody else and fail to uphold
Yeah,
their
I
own
would
values.
disagree, but we got to wrap up. So if you guys enjoyed, like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Subscribe, comment if you're on the website, if you're on Spotify, add us to your playlist. I don't know what the thing on Spotify is. Heart us, something like that. We're here every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And until next time,
Peace.